Hey, everybody, and welcome. So, we are about to get started today, and this morning we are going to talk about money and managing your finances in your SLP business, with your SLP career during, I would say, tough financial times or just in general. The reason I'm talking about this today is because as I am recording this, we are in the middle of the pandemic and a lot of people have had to cut their hours. Some people, I know some people who are working jobs where they can't go in might not be working at all. They might be on a leave. There are a lot of people in the world who have lost their jobs right now. So I know that there's a lot of fear going on right now. People are feeling nervous and about what's going to happen in the future. And so, we want to make sure that we are secure and that we have all of our things in order so that we can still show up for our clients if we are continuing to work. Because ultimately, we know that the clients that you're supporting are probably, again, there's all kinds of scary posts being shared on social media and things like that and on the news. Again, a lot of times on the news, it's very negative. There's a lot of worst case scenario things, and people just aren't really sure what to expect right now. So we want to show up for them and be that positive influence and be someone who's going to lift them up. So in order for us to be able to do that, we've got to make sure that we're taken care of and we've got our affairs in order, because if we're showing up in a state of fear, that's going to make it hard for us to support them. The other reason why I wanted to address this topic is because I have seen a lot of things on social media being shared, specifically with speech pathologists, about finances. And I wanted to share my take on it because over the past couple of years, as I've been running my business, I have had to have a lot of conversations with my husband, who has a finance background, and we've really done a lot to get our finances in order so that we're in a good place in a situation like this, so that we were prepared, so that we're not stressed out. And I wanted to share some of those things that I'm doing with you today. The other thing is that I have seen some articles floating around specifically for SLPs that I wouldn't say that they're bad advice, and I don't want to call out names specifically, specific authors or anything like that. But I do think that some of the advice being given in some of those articles can be either taken the wrong way, if taken out of context, or borderline dangerous if taken out of context, if you don't understand. When you see those articles where it's like top tips for managing your finances, if you don't really understand the context under which to use that advice or the situations under which you should use said tip, then it can get you in a situation that's not ideal. And also, I know that a lot of people have found some of the financial advice a bit condescending. So I wanted to share some of the things that I've been doing that have worked for me, and also share some resources with you so that you can not just get through this time, but once everything recovers, and I don't want to say is back to normal, because normal might look a little bit different once, things are back up and running. But we will recover from this. We've had things happen like this before. There will be a time when, even though things seem like they're kind of low right now, we will come back up again. We want to not just go back to doing what we were doing if we maybe had some habits that weren't ideal. We want to take this time to build some new habits and then stick with them when things get back to normal, or when things get back to more of a routine. So with that being said, I am going to talk about 3 different things that you can do. So 3 key steps that you can take right now in order to, or I would say things that you consider, or that you could consider in order to get yourself in a place where you are financially secure and in a place where you can really show up for your clients. So first, I wanted to share a resource that has been really helpful with me. I am going to be referencing it a lot today. A lot of the tips that I have that use in my own personal practices and that I'll be referencing today come from a book by an author named Ramit Sethi. I'm going to share in the chat, but also I will share this below the video. I'll share his site, and he also has a book if you go to his products page. But he focuses on personal finance, and he also helps people to start businesses. So the reason I share this, and I know that his website, I know he jokes around a lot about how his website sounds super scammy. It's called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And he's talked about that because he says that he has shared, or he's chosen that name partially because, he knows that it sounds a little, I don't know, I guess cheesy, get rich quick, like cheesy infomercial, or some people take it that way. But really, it sounds a lot more compelling than saying, like, I will teach you to be on a budget. And he's found that a lot of people, when you show them not just how to manage their finances, but also show them what's possible when you learn how to make more money, when you put those systems in place, what you can do in your life once you've done that, that's a lot more compelling to be to people, and a lot more motivating than stay on a budget. I mean, that's kind of almost, one of those things that a lot of the financial advisors out there are like, stop going to Starbucks, and, stop going and getting your nails done, and get on a budget. And when you think about it from that angle, that's why a lot of the financial advice that's been shared out there recently with SLPs comes across as really condescending, and no one wants to follow that. And if you've ever felt like you just can't get motivated to get on a budget, it might be because you're thinking of it from that angle, or you've been reading advice from people who share it from that angle. So rather than, they're all focused on like saving and, all of these things, they're not focused on, okay, what you can do once you actually put those systems in place, and that you don't have to necessarily deprive yourself in order for to be in a place where you are financially secure so you can enjoy life. And also, like I've said before, be in a place where you're taken care of so that you can fully serve your clients. Because a lot of people right now, like if you're running a private practice, maybe you're working for an organization and they've cut your hours, or if you're worried that they're going to cut you completely, like how are you going to show up for your patients if you've got that mindset? You can't be in that type of mindset and take care of other people. So that's why I wanted to share this, because he takes a different take on it, where he'll show you how to do all those things that you need to do in order to be responsible, but he also helps you think bigger. So if you're reading that title and you're like, what is this scammy stuff? It's not, it's legit advice. I use it all the time, and it's been a game changer for me. And he does have a book, I think it's on Amazon, less than $10 purchase. Also on, I'll share the Amazon link as well below the video, so that you can share so that you can watch through the book, but so that you can get the book. But it's called I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. So and he also is doing they're called fireside chats. I'll share that as well, but it is just something special that he's been doing, financial advice specific to the coronavirus and this pandemic right now. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go through three things that I've pulled out from his advice, how I've applied a lot of it to my personal practice, and then how you can take that advice and apply it to something SLP specific. I'm going to share some things that you can do, because he shares things that are a little more general. I'm going to talk about how you can take that and again, apply it to being an SLP with opportunities that are available to you specifically. So there are three things that are really the cornerstone of this discussion today. So that is number one, an emergency fund, how much you should have in it, what you can do right now in order to start building it up, and why it's so important, and why a lot of the advice out there about emergency funds is not necessarily the greatest advice. Number two, what you can do if you've got payments, debt payments right now, people you owe money to, rent, mortgage, whatever, any type of recurring payments that you have right now. If you're stressed about having to pay them, or worried about paying your bills, what you can do about that right now to minimize that and to, keep yourself in good standing right now. And then also number three, what you can do to figure out how to earn more money. So this is where he says is a little bit different than a lot of other people out there. A lot of people show you how to save. Not a lot of people talk about what you can do to actually earn more money. So obviously earning more money in itself, if you don't know how to do the first two things, if you don't know how to have your money going where it needs to go, obviously earning more money, if you're just going to blow it all on whatever, like it comes in and it goes out, if you don't do those things first, it's not going to help you. But there's only so much money that you can save if at your current salary. If you also have a means for making more money, expanding your options, then that, on top of those responsible financial practices that you already have, are actually, it's kind of like throwing gasoline on the fire. Then it really opens you up to new possibilities. So I wanted to talk about some different options for you if you are not really feeling secure in your career right now, if you're wanting to look for additional options and capitalize on the current opportunity. And if you're wanting to think about, okay, for the long term, how can I earn more, expand in my career as an SLP specifically. So let's talk a little bit about the emergency fund, and what you need to actually do to make sure that that happens. Because it's a lot of times people will, talk about it and not really show you how to do it. So number one, a lot of times people have said something like I've heard as low as people having like 3 months of an emergency fund, or sometimes I've heard 6 to 8 months of expenses, or 6 months salary, whatever that is. It matters less what your salary is and more what your monthly expenses are. So you want to not just figure out like, how much do I make every month? Because a lot of times people will tell you, have 6 months of your salary saved up in a savings account, so that you can access that money if you were to cut your expenses, or if you were to, not get paid. But what you really need to understand, if you want to have that security, is how much am I spending every month and what do I need every month to live? Because when you have that understanding, then that gives you some more flexibility, because what you can do is that you don't necessarily need 6 to 8 to 9 months salary or whatever it is. What Ramit recommends is having 1 year of your monthly expenses. So for example, I might, let's say that for example, like if you've gotten a raise in the last year, or you get your, you work at a school district, sometimes they give you 3% every year. If you have an understanding of what your base expenses are, that way when you get those increases in your salary, or when you learn how to make more money, you don't just like have this additional money and spend it right away. You can keep that level of, you can spend consciously and be aware of where your money is going. Because if you don't have that idea of what do I need every month, then it's hard to, when you're in a situation where you're in some distress, it's hard to figure out, okay, like, how am I going to pay the things that I have to pay? How am I going to prioritize? And so this is where, if you have that emergency fund set up, where you can start making better decisions about where you need to cut your expenses. And so honestly, it's the whole process of walking you through your budget and walking you through what your monthly expenses are is obviously beyond the scope of this discussion today. But essentially what you need to do is look at your credit card statements, look at, like, list out all the bills that you need to pay every month, figure out which ones are essential, which ones are things that you might, maybe they're not things that you need to live. Like, obviously you need food and a roof over your head to live. Be aware of what you need. And then also things that maybe you don't, like, you could survive without them, but maybe for whatever reason, it's just that much more important for you to continue to invest in those things. Like, for example, I made some purchases this year where it was like, okay, I've got, like housing expenses, food, insurance, health insurance, those types of things that I have to have. And then there are things that I choose to have. And I have, despite, maybe saying like, okay, I could live without this, I'm choosing not to. And even though we're in the middle of the pandemic, I'm making the conscious choice to continue paying for that because it's something that's important to me. Like, for example, I invest in course, like consulting for my business, because I want to continue to grow my business and figure out how to earn more so I can put myself in a better situation where I can, support my family, but also serve the people that are in my programs. And, I can hire people to do additional things for me to make the programs even better, things like that. That's something that's important to me. I could try to maintain the status quo, and just kind of do what I'm doing and cut costs and things like that. But I choose to invest in that. So when you have an idea, when you go through your monthly expenses like that and figure out how much am I spending every month, and just list those things out, and looking back at your bank statements, your credit card statements, things like that, and just having a list, and it's good to do it over the course of a year because, sometimes you have subscriptions that are billed yearly as opposed to monthly. So you can factor that in, things like that. And I, when I did my budget, I gave some cushion in there because I'm like, okay, there's these things that I'm like, okay, I know I'm going to be paying for these things. But then, let's say that I would have something come up where I would need to go to the doctor because I got sick or something like that. I'm like, okay, I know that this last year I had some unexpected things come up. I would budget for those unexpected things in my monthly expenses as well. So I would go through and look at all of those things and just list them out and figure out how much they were. And that's how I figured out my, like how much I needed in my emergency fund. Because I had to figure out, all right, what things do I have to have? And if I were to not get paid, how much would I need every month to cover those things? And that, more so than your salary, is really important, because you could get a raise or you could be making more than what your monthly expenses are. Maybe not, I don't know what your situation is, but having that understanding is going to be really what is going to help you to make more mindful decisions. I'll get into in a second here. I'm going to open up a document and dive into that whole emergency fund discussion a little bit further, because once you've done that, once you figure out like, okay, this much is in my emergency fund, this is what I'm going to do with my money every month. My husband and I have a system that we've worked out that works for me. You can take it and obviously do something that works for you, but I'll show you how we distribute everything every quarter, every month, things like that. I would recommend though, if you do get Ramit's book, he walks you through this process in more depth. And he talks about how to automate other things like paying your bills and things like that. And that way you don't have to make this conscious decision to put your money in different places. It just goes where it needs to go. The fewer decisions that you need to make, the less cognitive fatigue you're going to have. And the more you're going to be able to make better decisions and more mindful decisions. So I wanted to address, before I get into the budget that my husband and I have, is that I think why, and there were some articles that were floating around like, this is not the time to be going to Starbucks every day, blah, blah, blah. And people thought it was really condescending. And, it's not bad advice on the surface to be like, okay, don't make extravagant purchases right now. But the problem with that is that it makes a lot of assumptions about your situation. And it kind of, I guess, I guess it is a little bit condescending for lack of a better word, because it, it doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, and it makes a lot of assumptions about your situation. So for example, um, let's say that we've got somebody who has a 1 year built up of emergency fund. They've got all their expenses automated and everything is going, like their bills are all being paid. They have money going into their accounts that need to be, they're funding their retirement. They're, you know, they're doing everything that they need to be doing. All their money is accounted for. And then they choose to maybe invest in something else on top of that for their health, like they want to get a Beachbody subscription or something like that during the quarantine. And it's like, yeah, do you need a subscription? No, but maybe you want to. Maybe you're a kind of person that you don't like to work out on your own, and you like the motivation. You feel like it's something that you need to do for your health and your sanity when you're quarantined or whatever it is. If you've got your finances in order, then you don't need someone to come in and tell you, like, stop going to Starbucks, stop your subscription to whatever it is, because you can make those decisions mindfully, knowing that you have the funds to do that. And if somebody makes a blanket statement, stop all those things, without knowing if you've done those other things, it's just like it's kind of irrelevant advice. You might actually get more benefit from investing in those things right now, if you are in a situation where you can't do that financially. So yes, if you do your expenses, you figure out like where all my money's going, and you think, you know what, based on where I am, I should not be eating out. Well, obviously nobody's eating out right now, but I should not be spending money on extra things that are not necessary, but things that I want that are above and beyond that. If you go through your expenses and figure that out, then yes, don't go to Starbucks or order DoorDash or whatever. Like, use your, cook in and do things less expensively and cut costs if it's something that is actually necessary for your situation. But do the emergency fund first and figure out what your expenses are first. Then you can actually make those decisions mindfully in a way that is relevant to you, rather than some finance guru telling you and guilt, like shaming you for spending money on whatever. Like it's just not relevant to everybody. So do that first, because that's what's going to help you to make those good decisions for yourself. So that's my number one thing with the emergency fund. One other thing before I go into the budget or the arrangement that my husband and I have with me, is that in Ramit's book, he also talks about how, and on his fireside chats, he talks about this as well. And I'll share all those things in the links below. But what people don't realize is that, so right now during the pandemic, like let's say that you're renting, a lot of landlords are in a tough situation right now because their tenants maybe aren't working and their tenants aren't paying rent. Those landlords have to still pay bills right now. And it's stressful for everybody, because it's like, think about if you haven't had a decrease in salary and you're having a hard time paying your bills, those people that you're paying are also businesses that are also dependent on your money for them to pay their bills. So there's this whole like cycle of things that are going on right now. And so you can actually reach out to some of those people and negotiate a situation. Like, if let's say that you are, you have credit card debt, there's a lot of things you can do to negotiate, not having late fees. You can negotiate if you've got student loan payments, if you've got rent. You can actually talk to those people and try to negotiate a situation where maybe you reduce your payments, do something, especially if you've had a good history with them. And especially if you're being proactive, a lot of people don't realize you can do that. So maybe you negotiate now, that your rent payments are a little bit less right now or something like that. Likely whoever it is that you owe money to, they'd probably rather that you reached out to them proactively and tried to work something out if you're stressed about making those payments, rather than you like not being able to make those payments and not paying them at all. So in his book, he talks about how to do that, how to negotiate your rent, how to negotiate with credit card companies about payments, and for anybody that you owe money to. So number one, you want to do the emergency fund, figure out how to again, figure out how much you're spending, but also when you figure out how much you're spending, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to be stressful for the next couple months for me to make these payments, then you can talk to those people, reach out to those companies, anybody that you owe money to, and try to negotiate something so that it can put you in a better situation. So for example, maybe if you can reduce those payments and you don't have an emergency fund, you can start building it up right now. Obviously that emergency fund for everything else that you might be paying right now, that's going to be your main priority. Ramit even said, like, if you've got a choice between funding your retirement and funding your emergency fund, if you don't have an emergency fund right now, he recommended prioritizing the emergency fund over the retirement for right now, because we're in the middle of a pandemic. Get that built up, and then you can start putting that money away into those other accounts. So what I do, let me show this quick Google Doc. It's a Word doc. I'm just going to share this with you right now so I can kind of talk through this with you. Okay, so this is what my husband and I do for my business. So we have done all the things that I just mentioned, figure out what our monthly expenses are. We figure out what my husband pays, like he pays the insurance because I am self-employed. So we get his insurance. He takes care of that stuff. He has all of the bills paid automatically from a joint checking account that we have. And so he takes care of all of those things, but I've made sure that those things are happening. And then what I do is that I make sure that from my account, from my business account, and when I was employed, I would have my paycheck go into this account, or a certain amount of my paycheck would go one place, and then I would put money into this account to pay bills. But what we do is we do things based on how much we need to pay every month for bills and things like that. We do things monthly, and then we do some things quarterly. And this is just what works for us. You might choose to do everything monthly or everything quarterly. But what we do monthly is that every month, I put a certain amount of money, set amount of money, bills into joint checking. So that amount of money is like, what are our housing expenses, our groceries, our utilities, things like that. That pays for the things that we have to have. And there's a set amount that my husband and I have decided on based on what he pays, what he's contributing, and then based on how much it costs us to live. And again, I've figured out all of that stuff already. And that's what has determined how much I put into that account. So that's the number one priority that I do every month. I put that amount of money into that account so that we can pay our bills. We're good. My husband and I don't have to have an argument about, who's going to pay this, how we're going to pay that. We already know how it's being done. It's taken out of the account and it just goes where it needs to go. I will say that before we had this system, especially when I was first starting my business, there were some tense conversations where he's like, hey, when are you going to start putting money into that account? Things like that. It caused arguments. That's why we came up with this system. So we just avoid all of that. We have these boundaries and these expectations. So we don't have to have discussions about it. We just know what's going to happen. So that's done every month. Now, the next level, obviously, is emergency fund. So that would be the next thing. So it's like, okay, what do I have to do right now? What's urgent? And then the emergency fund. We have that taken care of, so we don't need to fund it anymore. We can put our money towards other things, but that's the next level. So when I was funding my emergency fund, I would pay the bills first, and then I would put money into my emergency fund account, like another account separate from the bills account, because what happens is that, and again, you've got to kind of train yourself on this as well. But if the money is in the bills account, that I think subconsciously it's like, oh, that's money I can spend. I put it separate because I do not want to be tempted to spend it. And I actually have to like transfer it here and put it there. Like I can't easily, I can get to it within a couple days if I need to, but it's got to transfer to this account and transfer to that account. I don't have any checks or anything I can write. It's got to transfer to another account first before I can spend it. So that extra step is something that keeps me honest with not thinking like, oh, I'll just write a check for whatever. Like it really makes me think about things before I would go to spend that money. So I would put something in place where it's there, you can get to it within a couple days, but you have some extra steps you have to do, because it's like, do I really want to spend this? Because, you know, again, and maybe you do, but that helps keep me honest, so I can't just like immediately debit it. It's like I don't have a debit card or checks or anything for that fund. It's just a savings account. I actually use, it used to be ING Direct for that account, but now I use, it's Capital One 360. They changed, and they used to have a high interest rate. It does not now because interest rates are low, but for a savings account, it was the highest one that they had. So that's where I put that money. And it's linked up to my checking. I can also transfer that to the joint checking that I have with my husband if I wanted to, but it would take a couple days. So that's the next level. Obviously, if you're self-employed, I would say actually, if you're self-employed, you want to do quarterly taxes. Whether you want to set aside money for that monthly or quarterly is up to you. What I do is I just have figured out what my quarterly taxes need to be, and I just leave it in my business account and just say like, I'm going to leave this amount in my account and leave this much of a cushion in there, so that I know that every quarter I can pay my taxes. And then I know at the end of the year I can pay my taxes. That's how I do it. Some people I know, if you feel like you might be tempted to spend that money, if it's in your account, then I would set aside money for taxes if you're self-employed. If you're employed, you don't necessarily need to worry about that. But this is huge. Like, you don't want to get to the end of the year and realize that you owe all this money to the IRS and then have to pay it and not have it in your account. So if you need to have a separate account for that, then I would. I don't do it that way because I know I can restrain myself, but do whatever you need to do based on yourself. So that's how I handle that. If you're not sure, if you're self-employed and you're not sure how much you should be setting aside for taxes, I would talk to your accountant about that. They will be able to tell you when they do your taxes for the year, based on what you made the previous year, how much you should be paying at your quarterly payments. And so you can use that to figure out what you need to do. Now, I do not do this monthly. All I do monthly right now, because I keep money in my account for my taxes, and I have an emergency fund, I just do this monthly. But if you want to do these other things monthly, you can. Quarterly, what my husband and I do is, we know that this is being taken care of every month. So quarterly, so that would be, after, 3 months. So like March, like I guess it would be the beginning of April. Let's see. And then beginning of July. And then when's the next one? July, August, September, October. Then beginning of November, beginning of October, and then at the end of the year. So those are the quarters. Then we do some other things. We distribute money some other places. So obviously you want to figure out, like, do I want to do these things quarterly or monthly? There's no right or wrong way to do it. This is just how we do it. What we do, I quarterly will first, so I've been doing this every month so that my bills are being paid. And then I first pay taxes. So that's the first thing I do with the extra funds that I have, is I pay my quarterly taxes. So again, I do that quarterly. You can set aside money into an account monthly if you want. And then after that, we have different levels. So after taxes, then if you have not decided to fund your emergency fund every month, I would recommend doing it every month. But if you wanted to do it quarterly, you could do that as well. Then the next level would be emergency fund, if you're not already doing it every month. And if you don't already have it, then the next level would be retirement. So that's the level that I do it. So it's like this much money goes to bills, then the next level is emergency fund, then the next level is retirement. So just quarterly, my husband and I look at what we have in our accounts and we're like, okay, we know that money's being paid for our bills. So the next level is, let's make sure we pay our taxes. We've got this taken care of, so we don't fund it anymore. But beforehand, we were making sure that we were doing that. And then it's, we do retirement. So it's like, how much do I want to contribute to my self-employed 401k? Now, a lot of people with this retirement, I do it quarterly, but a lot of people choose to do it up here. This is only if you have your emergency fund. But a lot of people choose to automatically have stuff go into their retirement accounts monthly. And I think that's actually what Ramit recommends as well. But you could do it quarterly. That's how I do it. So make that decision, determining, based on what works for you. But this is how we've decided to do it. Then after we've done retirement, then we have the next level, which is what we call guilt-free spending. And so then we have a certain account or a certain amount that goes for 3 different funds. And so again, like all of this other stuff is taken care of. So then we have Karen's account, Joe's account, my husband, and then family account. So we have a fund for my stuff that's like stuff I want to do, stuff I want to spend money on. And then Joe's account for stuff he wants to spend money on, and then a family account. And so that's like vacations and things like that. And so sometimes we might choose, like I might say like, okay, I'm just going to put my money in our family account because we're going to go on vacation or whatever. Joe and I have chosen to spend our personal spending money on things that might be for the entire family. That's up to us. But that money that goes into the accounts, there's no judgment. There's no like, it's whatever, I don't have to ask permission to use that money from him. It's just, we know that money has gone to those places. So that's how we do it. And again, that's that last level. So it's like, if I want to use that money to go to Starbucks every day, I can. If I want to do whatever I want to do, go get a massage every week. That's how I decide if and when I can do those types of things. I do have things, that kind of come out before, like I invest in certain things in the business that I might invest in before paying bills, but only if I know that there is a certain amount in my account. We've been doing this system long enough that I know, okay, I can invest in this consulting program. And again, that gets taken out of my business expenses. It's a tax deduction. I know that I can do that because I know, you kind of, once you do this a while and once you have things automated, you get an idea of how much you can spend where. But if you have no idea where you're spending what you're spending, then it's really hard to figure out where you should be cutting those things out. And That's why I don't like the advice about like, oh, just stop spending money on lattes. Well, it's not going to help you if you don't understand all of these other things. You could stop going to Starbucks and still not have your finances in order because you don't have the right system. The system needs to come first, then you can make those other decisions. So again, like this is how, let me actually remove how this works. This is how we do it, because we don't do those other things. But you could do all these things monthly. You could do all these things quarterly. Just decide what works for you. So that is our system. And again, remember that you want to make sure, like the way that you actually make that work is that you can, figure out how much you're spending every month. Last thing I wanted to talk about, that is Ramit's third tip. Well, he's got a lot of tips, but of the tips, 3 tips that I pulled out to share today. Again, we had build up your emergency fund. Try to negotiate. Like if you don't have that emergency fund and you do owe people money, talk to those people, see if you can negotiate a plan to maybe reduce your payments if you're stressed out about paying them. Use the scripts in his book to do that. He'll walk you through that process. And then number 3 is figure out how to make more money. And this is what a lot of people don't talk about. So Ramit has some programs about starting a business. I actually used one of his programs to start my business, actually several of his programs. I got a handful of them. But I wanted to talk about some things that are SLP specific, because his advice will be helpful, but there are some programs out there that were designed for SLP specifically. And if you're like, you know what, I don't want to start a business, there are some other options for you as well. If you want to just know what's out there as far as opportunities for SLPs. So the biggest opportunities right now, well, obviously the big one is obviously teletherapy, because we're doing everything online. Everybody is making that transition. Some people are able to continue their current number of hours and maintain their salary by just totally going digital right now. So if that's a situation, maybe you want to decide to earn more money on the side. Maybe you don't, maybe you're fine. But if you are in a situation where your hours have been cut, it might be a good idea to start looking at some other options out there to keep your options open. So with that being said, the 2 big options right now are for SLPs, and these are not the only options. These are the 2 most obvious ones. Is number 1, taking private clients on the side or trying to make that transition full-time eventually. And number 2 is picking up some hours for a company that does teletherapy. There are some companies that have gone to teletherapy now because they have to, but there were some that were already providing teletherapy before. So the benefit of going with one of those is that they already know what's going on and can support you in getting set up. So if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed, they already have training in place to get you set up on a teletherapy platform. So that could be beneficial for you. It could be a learning experience for you as well. So what I've done this past week is I've called some companies that in the past have been hiring for teletherapy positions, because I know that some companies have put a hiring freeze on right now because they're getting bombarded, or maybe because of they're not sure how the market is going, things like that. I wanted to make sure that I called the companies and gave you accurate information before I shared that information with you. So number 1, let's talk about if you are wanting to just pursue other options when it comes to being employed. So I talked to this week, I contacted Tiny Eye, ProCare, Global Teletherapy, Presence Learning, and Soliant Health. So those are 5 that I know that have some teletherapy positions posted. If you go on glassdoor.com or some of the other job posting sites, there are teletherapy jobs that are posted. However, if you look at the post date, if they happened before the pandemic, you may or may not be sure if those jobs are still available. There are a lot of jobs posted still. But what I did is I contacted the companies to see if they're actually still hiring for those positions, or if those posts are out of date, if things have changed and they haven't been able to update their postings yet, which is very likely that might happen. I did not hear back from Soliant or Presence Learning. So keep that in mind. Doesn't mean that they're, you don't need to cast judgment on the company about that, but I didn't hear back yet. So take that information as you may. I heard back from Tiny Eye when I went on their chat. They've got a little chat on their website. I talked to somebody and I got on pretty quickly with them. And I called somebody from ProCare, was able to get on with a representative after waiting on hold for not too long, 10, 15 minutes or so. And then I contacted Global Teletherapy via their contact form, got an email back that was kind of generic, replied to that email, and got a do not reply response or message wasn't delivered response. But then later, a day or two later, somebody actually reached out to me, had seen my message, reached out to me directly and gave me a link and said that they were hiring. So the companies that I heard back from are Tiny Eye, ProCare, and Global Teletherapy. Tiny Eye, when I talked to the representative, was a little vague when I asked the question. I said, are you hiring? Because I have a group of SLPs that I would gladly recommend and send to you if you are hiring. And they kind of dodged the question. And then I came back and said, did you really, you're not answering my question. What's the deal? Are you hiring now? Because I don't want to send you people if you are not hiring. And they said, we're placing our therapists with our current people who are employed. People are welcome to apply, but we're placing our current therapists that are already employed with us first, making sure that they're taken care of, and then we'll consider new applicants. So would be worth, if you're looking to apply with them. I have talked to their recruiters in the past, and I have not taken a job with them, but the recruiter that I talked to a while back was extremely knowledgeable, really knew a lot about the company, was able to answer specific questions. So I didn't choose to take that job because I chose to go in the direction of, at the time I was teaching adjunct. So I chose to do that instead and do my online continuing education business that I'm doing right now instead. But was a good experience. I felt like the recruiter really knew what he was doing. So I feel like that's kind of a red flag when the person on the phone has no idea about, do you renew your contracts? Do people continue to work for you after that first year, or do they bail? That's, to me, kind of a red flag. Or, he was able to answer questions about how do you evaluate your employees? How do you train them? How do you get them set up? So that was comforting. But again, I think some companies right now just, they want to make sure that their current employees are taken care of first, which to me was a good sign. They want to take care of their current people. So that's, take that information and use that how you will. The other companies, ProCare and Global Teletherapy, said that they were hiring. And they gave me a specific link that they could use to apply. With ProCare, they said that they need people in New York, California areas of high need. And a lot of those companies will help you with licensure. So you need to be licensed in the place that the client lives. I have been told you need to be licensed in the state where you are, in the state where the client lives. They told me at the company, they said you just need to be licensed where the client is. I would recommend being licensed in your state, which you should already be, and then also be licensed in the state where your client is. Those companies will all help you to obtain your licensure in the company where they want you to serve. So there is a chance that if you don't live in New York and California, that you can talk to some of those companies about them helping you obtain licensure so that you can serve some of those clients. So even if you don't work in any of those high needs areas, there are opportunities for you. So they are hiring, especially in those areas. So I have not gone through that hiring process. I have not gone through the licensure process with them, but I know that they, according to what their recruiters told me, they are doing that. So that is an option for you. I will post links to all of those companies and I will post updates on like what contact I've had with them. Again, I'm just putting this information out there that's been shared with me. Some of these companies, I might have replied to them and not heard back. So be aware of that. And I'll share which ones I've actually talked to and what they've said when I share the links in the description below this video. Finally, obviously, starting a private practice. I know Jenna Castro-Casbin, I am an affiliate for her, so I do send people to her Start Your Private Practice program, because it's a program I highly recommend. I do get a commission for sending her people, but again, obviously I wouldn't send people to her if I didn't think she had an amazing program. I know that she is talking about how to get clients during a pandemic. She's addressing those types of things in her free private practice group, and she addresses how to get clients in her Start Your Private Practice program. So that is another option for you if you're not sure if you want to get a job at one of these companies that has a teletherapy position and you want to take matters into your own hands and have some control over how you serve your clients, what your rates are, things like that. Starting a private practice, starting to take those private clients is also another option for you when it comes to figuring out how to make more money. So I will share those links to Jenna's programs and Facebook group as well, because she would be a great resource for you if you're wanting to get started in seeing some clients right now, and starting to start your private practice on the side as well. She's also got a teletherapy crash course where she walks through some of those things that you need to know in order to get started in teletherapy. So I'll share that link as well. And then finally, I do have a good interview about how to get started in teletherapy. If you're wanting to go the private practice route, and you know, obviously if you're going the private practice route, you're on your own as far as training and things like that. You don't have an employer to train you on platforms. So you're going to need to figure out some of those things on your own. So I will share the interview I did with Tracy Sipple, who is a teletherapy consultant as well. So to review, what we talked about today is, the three things that you want to be doing right now to figure out how to get your finances in order is, again, make sure you have that 1 year emergency fund. So 1 year of your monthly expenses. That's a little more than what people tell you to do, but again, it's expenses, not income, how much you actually need to live. So figure out what that is. Number two, call anybody, figure out who you owe money to. And if you are stressed out right now about making those payments, if it's going to make it really hard for you to start building up that emergency fund, think about calling them and negotiating, maybe getting some late fees waived, maybe temporarily reducing some of your payments if your paycheck is reduced right now, those kinds of things. So I recommend both of those two things. Ramit will help you do in his book. And then number three, figure out how to make more money. That's another option for you as well. If you have the time right now, if you're in a situation where you can take on more clients or some more hours and you need those hours in order to start building up that fund and those funds that you want, figuring out how to earn more money is another option as well. So we've got the two big opportunities right now are working for a company that does teletherapy, that can train you, and so you can really get good at doing teletherapy, or to start a private practice and start taking private clients on the side. And you really don't need to go full in, jump all in. Starting a private practice, it can just simply start with the first client. You can simply start doing that on the side. There are a lot of people who are in need of additional services right now, or stressed about their kids not being in school. So that is a huge opportunity for you as well. So I will share all those links below this video. I hope you found that helpful, and let me know what follow-up questions you have. For SLP Learning Academy, if you are watching this, if you have questions that you want to submit for future calls, feel free to email them to me at talktome@drkarenspeech.com. So for now, we'll wrap this up. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening.